Hello and welcome to the channel. Cursive writing has been a source of obsession for me as I've been refining the style of my handwriting. Now for me, it's not about perfection. It's about having an interesting expression of the cursive penmanship. So if you're new to cursive writing, follow along and you'll pick up some new tips. And if you've been writing for a long time, then see if you do things the way I do. And if you don't, let me know what you're doing. It's always interesting to see how we develop this together. So join me today, won't you, as I explore my obsession with cursive lowercase letters. Let's go through our tools today. Today we're using this beautiful smooth Rhodia paper with lines that should make writing easier for us. This has a wonderful finish that shows the quality of ink in a very beautiful way. Our tool today is the lovely Mani Blani 149, one of my favorite pens of all time. Kind of falling in love with it all over again. Today, we're using oxblood ink. I've recently filled it with oxblood. This is a medium nib, and it's certainly a lot of fun to write with, very comfortable. So let's start where we always start, at the beginning of the alphabet, and the letter A. So I always start at the bottom line. This is my philosophy of writing. And I like to come up like a little bean, if you will, sort of an oval to form my A's. And this gives you a really nice entrance and exit for this letter. So if it's part of another letter, you can roll right into it. Now, with all my lowercase letters, I like to start at the bottom line. And I like to end up about here, and then for the ones that go high, I never like to touch the line above it. I like to end up about there. So you can see that we did that with the A and the L. But these are the sort of things that run through my mind as I write, whether or not I'm keeping to my sort of philosophy of handwriting. But I'm trying to relax my hand here, trying to make it light and expressive to glide across the page and to just let the fountain pen do its job. I mean, it doesn't need any pressure at all. This is just gliding on air. So absolutely lovely. So there we have some A's. Now, B is another source of problems for me because it does come up, comes down, and then swirls and comes out. Now that's actually a pretty effective B. I feel pretty good about that, but you certainly enter like an L with a nice slant. Then you come up as if to finish your L, and then you're falling back down, almost like there was only enough gravity and momentum to get you through the high loop. And by the time you got to the lower loop, you ran out of steam, you doubled back, and then you came out straight. So almost like a plane doing skywriting, and it only made it that far. And there you have it, a nice B. Sometimes I don't put that little loop in and I just come out like that. But you do have to be careful sometimes because it definitely is in L territory, and your L's and your B's can run together. And there's a lot of challenges. I mean, linking a B with a C, not that it happens very often in the English language. I mean, sometimes it's better to cheat a little and to come out and then start your C independently. That's probably the best thing to do, but there are definitely some awkward joining letter forms. A B and a J, for instance. You have to plunge down, hope for the best. Well, while I mention J, let's just jump right into a J. That way we won't get into a sort of sing-songy alphabet recitation while we do this. So the J is really interesting. It comes up in a nice sort of ramp, if you will, and then plunges deeply down into the next line, loops around and comes up. But what you want to be mindful is these are probably too long. They're going to obstruct whatever's going on in the next line. But this one's okay. So you want to leave a little space on that line so that you can write beneath it, but also have a really lovely curvy J. And I actually like the way that entrance tail comes out. Very nice. You can see we're getting a little bit of line variation just from the shape of that nib. Absolutely gorgeous. I'm pretty happy with that J. So another letter that is much more difficult than it appears is a C, which we also mentioned earlier. So starting at that line, you come up in a little arch and then back down. Now, it's nice to put a little hook on it sometime, but I think where I run into trouble is when the arch starts to get messy and not form a really nice circular motion. And then you can get these sort of trebly C's that look nervous, and especially once they're in a word. S, like sigh, we see that quite a bit. You just want your C's to really represent themselves well. It's easy at the beginning. Sometimes you can start up if you don't like the little entrance stroke. But other times it's awfully nice to have that, especially if it's wispy. It gives it a little bit more presence. From C, we'll plunge right into D. D starts off like an A, but then does a little trick. It goes up and either loops around or plunges right back straight down. I always feel that loopier Ds are a little bit more friendly, where the solid D stem looks a little bit more severe and a little bit more dressy, if you will. Maybe somewhat mid-century. And a lot of my handwriting does go back to my Palmer method training. So a lot of what I'm doing is that with a base of my historical observations about these various letters. Now E, I think the biggest thing with E is just to make sure that the loop is open. That's not very open. You want it to sort of have a bit of space between the two rising and the falling motions of those lines, so that it is definitely easily identifiable as an E. Now F is particularly beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful letters. You want your slant to be consistent, but it goes up as an arch and then just plunges down into the next line a little too far there and then up. Now, my philosophy of writing, once again, I love this line to connect at the bottom base line when it comes up. And I actually want more space here. So I want it to come up like that and then come down and then come up and through, almost like you're tying a knot. It's almost like a little bow, isn't it? And you're tying that bow at the end. This is a letter for a top of a present. So that's your present. And you're tying your bow. I love that. I love this F. I feel very good. You can make it look a little more severe too by not opening the top. But personally, I like a nice, bold, loopy bow tie of an F. I live for it. I'm going to skip over G because I feel like it's a lot like a J with an A on top. So pretty easy. And I'm trying to avoid doing these in strict order. I do find that a lot of the letters that are simple, like an I, are one of the toughest. And once again, Hemingway Jones' philosophy and theory of handwriting, one of the most important things about your I is to do a nice round dot. Where you get off your sort of form is when you do a little slash. That was a big slash, but it starts to look really messy if you're not doing a proper dot on the top. And I think it's okay even to be slightly oversized, but as long as it's a dot and it's sort of crowned there like a golf ball on a tee, as nearly as you can do that is as beautiful as it will look. Sometimes when you're writing fast, it's a bit tough to keep that in there, and you sort of want to just sort of hit it, and then it starts to look messy. So look out for that. Now, similarly with H, this is a letter I just obsess over. I like to have a loop up the top, and I like to have a nice, well-defined hump that comes out off of it. But the trick is keeping it consistent and not making it look like a K. This looks like a K. And it's probably a good idea to talk about a K because they're very similar. So you come up and then you fall back down in a nice sort of pitched arch, and that's your H right there. And if you put a little break in it, a little bump, there's your K. And I always like my Ks to sort of loop up dramatically. But these letters are just very good to practice together. You can go H to K, and there is a slightly different feel to the bottom of the K because you feel like a H till you get to here, and then it bends up, and then it's almost like a swoosh coming out of it. So it's a very dramatic letter, and I really like that. O's, once again, deceptively simple and also very hard because you want a nice little loop. And this one also, I rarely go off the bottom line, but you can. You can have a little ascender and then have it come out like that. And that looks pretty nice. But I habitually want to start up top. But it does look really nice if you can start at the bottom. So I think one of the things you're careful with an O is how it goes into an R. So if you write this word, you can see that it's a bit high and it looks very awkward. So you want to bring your exit line much lower, and then you can go up into a very nice R and then finish your word. It's a perfect E exit. If that G hits the line on its exit and then stops and then comes around for an E, you get a very nice symmetry with this G loop and the E being about the same size. That looks really nice. I'm pretty happy with that. Now, R's themselves are very, very difficult, deceptively so. I mean, there's many different ways to do them. You can go up and then loop around and down. So here you're making a little stem, looping around, and then making a point and coming down almost in a C shape. That's a little exaggerated, but you get the idea. The other way to do it is to eliminate the loop, go up, come out with the point and down. So you're getting some version of that. Now, R's are very tough in words because they sort of need their original structure to make them look like an R. And you can really lose that. You can lose it by making it sort of like that. It actually doesn't look too bad. But have you ever seen it when your R's sort of lose all their structure and they end up looking like little ghosts? They sort of end up like that. And you read them as R's, but they've sort of lost the essence of an R. I think that's a big challenge. So R's are certainly difficult. I think the most difficult lowercase letter for me is the Z. And I'll show you why. The Z comes up with a nice loop ascender, and then it falls right back down to the ground. Just gravity has just pulled it right back. From there, there's a little loop, and it tries to go up again, and then once again plunges deep into the ground, and then comes up, hopefully through the bottom line, and you get a decent looking Z. Now this is true Palmer method. Now where this is hard, and I'm going to write it large here. Where this is hard is there's a lot going on, and if you're trying to keep your slant consistent, and then you have all that, I mean, that's really terrible, but it's really hard to try to make a word that looks decent. So say you start with a word. Let's say you start a word with a letter you like an F. You go into some decent E's, and now you have to try to match the tail of your Z with this F. It's just, I find it to be very, very difficult. But I think it's worth the effort in trying. Yeah, it's worth the... I was really hoping I could nail a nice example, but it really is a challenge for me. See, this is way too small. See, this is here, this is here. There needs to be symmetry. All these are kind of off, to be honest, but this is my struggle. This is the sort of thing that I really obsess over while I do this, and I kind of self-criticize. Actually, I like this. It's a little bit of a mess. This is too long, but it's expressive. And I'd rather be expressive than perfect. But these are the sort of letter forms that I practice when I'm on the telephone with someone, or I'm just relaxing with a fountain pen without really writing. I even work on my handwriting while I'm journaling, but I do try to suspend that internal critical monologue that's constantly telling me that things need to be balanced or done in a certain way, because I'm trying to get my innermost thoughts down on the page, and I don't want my inner voice criticizing me while I do it. So there is a time to think about these things, and that's why handwriting exercise is so valuable, because you can designate a certain time to just writing and a different time to journaling when you're not really thinking about your writing quite as much, but it's still an opportunity to practice. So I think some of the easier letters to do are the M's and the N's. Those are just humps with a nice exit stroke. Very nice to do. Very, very easy. T's can be deceptively hard, and it's all in how you cross it. Sometimes a nice little loop is nice. Sometimes it's nice to do a nice straight line. You definitely want to keep it together. See how that's spread? You want a nice tight T. I have T's in my name, so I get a lot of practice, but I'm not super happy with all my T's all the time. Sometimes it's nice to bring the cross to the end of the word. It can give you a little dramatic flair. This starts with a little loop and then goes in for a cross, which is nice. That's a capital T. We did that already. But these are fun. I do find it very difficult to keep them uniform. If I do 50 of these, I doubt there are 2 that are twins. I mean, they look like little people, right? Look like little people running. But what they don't look is too uniform, and that's the root of my obsession. Another extremely difficult letter is an X, especially when it's in a word. It basically goes up like a unformed R, and then plunges back down and exits, and then there's a cross. Now, sometimes this can be a very dramatic cross to make your writing really interesting. So you can do that. That's very lovely, I think. But whenever you do it, you just want a nice definite cross to make sure it looks like an X. Because without it, I think you would read that as an R. I mean, it's not a word, but you would certainly read it as an R. So I think G's and Y's are very similar, so I don't think we need to speak about Y, but I think it's valuable to talk about Q, because Q's both a lot of fun and sort of complex. So it comes up like an A, and if you were to just stop there, you'd have the beginnings of an A. And then it plunges down into the underworld. And now, instead of looping like a G, it loops the opposite way. It's almost like a mirror image of a G at the bottom. But it comes up and then ties around and then comes up again. So this is a really beautiful letter with a lot going on. Plunges down and then up. So you often see a Q in the beginning of a word. So you can do a nice entrance stroke and get a very effective cue like that. So I do love cues, and I could make them all day, and my cues are fairly uniform, but this is the form I like. I do like to keep the slant consistent. You can see I'm very off here, but this isn't about making excuses. This is about growing as I don't want to say calligrapher, I'd say as someone who's loves penmanship and is trying to refine their penmanship. Now, S's always give me the idea of a sail. They have an ascender and then a little point, and then they come down and they exit. Sometimes I bring it up and then I loop up like this for something a little bit more dramatic. Cursive is designed to never lift the pen off the ground. S's are really lovely. They're always a bit of a challenge, but if you keep it uniform, you can definitely get to a nice, beautiful, consistent shape. So you want to keep your slant and your lines all going in the same direction just to try to make it look a bit more uniform. Although your little departures from that will also give it a bit of personality. Part of the fun for me with fountain pens is obsessing and working on my handwriting, and I know it's a process. I may never get to font-worthy penmanship, but it's okay. I'm enjoying this journey, and I hope you enjoyed this journey today with us. So if you've reached this point in the video, consider subscribing. I'd love to have you here for future videos. And if you want to support the channel even more, consider membership. I'd love to have you see what's going on behind the scenes, and membership helps to keep this all going. So thank you very much. So I make new videos each week, and I have a live show Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. So I can promise you, we will see each other again very soon, further up the road. So take care.